Now, Oyster Blade is a great cut of beef. It's very versatile and I've done a few different things with it on this channel. You can smoke it like a brisket and serve it in slices. It makes great pulled beef. You can take out the gristle and cook it up as a couple of flat iron steaks. But in this video, we're going to be reverse searing it as a whole piece. Alright, so whatever barbecue you're using, get it going in a smoking setup for the first part of this cook. I'm just using our blackjack kettle, and all I'm going to be doing is opening it up, taking our cooking grate off, and then I'm going to put our slow and sear basket in, which is pretty much just an oversized charcoal basket. Then you want to fill that up with lumped charcoal or briquettes. Then you want to bury a fire lighter in one end and light it up. Alright, so while our briquettes are catching light, we're going to trim and season our oyster blade. This one weighs around 1.2 kilos, and straight out of the packet, this one doesn't need much, if any, trimming at all. Now, most of the time, oyster blade will have a fat cap on top, and then a bunch of silver skin on the other side you need to trim off. Now, this one didn't need much trimming, and honestly, I probably didn't need to trim it at all, but one thing I'm going to do is just square up this thin end, and that way we'll get a much more even cook out of this oyster blade. And don't throw away that thin end piece. You could pan fry that as it is, or you could separate this into two little steaks and remove that gristle. Then you've got some little flat iron steaks, or you could trim out that gristle and then chop this up for stir fry pieces too. And the next thing you want to do is get your oyster blade seasoned up in your favorite steak rub. There's still plenty of moisture on this steak, so I'm not going to be using a binder, but if your rub's struggling to stick to the meat, use something like olive oil or yellow mustard. Now, this is a thick piece of meat, so don't be afraid to give it a nice generous coating, and don't forget to season your edges as well. Alright, now our briquettes have caught light and they're burning nicely. I'm just going to place a nice little chunk of cherry wood on our charcoal grate to preheat with our barbecue. Then we'll shut our lid, open up both of our vents, then we'll let our barbecue preheat until it's just below 250 Fahrenheit or 120 Celsius, which is around the temperature we want to be stabilizing off at for the first part of this cook. Then once our barbecue's preheated, we'll open it up, get our cherry wood on the burning part of our briquettes. I'll get a foil tray down underneath where our meat's going to sit. Then we'll get our cooking grate back on, and we'll get our oyster blade on, and now we'll shut our lid and let that oyster blade smoke away for a while. So now what we want to do is just let that steak smoke away until it reaches an internal temperature in the thickest part of around 46 Celsius or 115 Fahrenheit. I reckon that's going to take an hour to an hour and a half to get there. Then after that, we'll bring it out for a rest, and during that rest, we're going to get some carryover cooking, probably up to around that 54 degrees Celsius or 130 Fahrenheit, which is that perfect medium rare. We'll be giving our oyster blade a good 15 to 20 minute rest, and we're only going to get some carryover cooking for the first 5 minutes or so of that rest, and then that internal temperature will start dropping. Then we're going to finish our steak off with a quick sear, and because it's only going to be a quick sear, we don't really have to worry about that internal temperature exceeding that medium rare doneness, which is what I'm going for. Now, you can either reverse sear it as a whole piece, or after it's had a rest, you can slice it into steaks and sear the steaks individually, but we're going to be doing it all as a whole piece because I haven't done it this way before with an oyster blade. So while our oyster blade is smoking away, I'm going to go through a few questions and comments from the post I put up in our YouTube community about this cook. Now, the first question is from SteveBone9190, and it asks, have you thought about adding some sous vide to some of your cooks? Now, the answer is yes, I've definitely thought about it, but it doesn't really fit with the whole smoking theme of the channel. I have used them before, but it's definitely more just for indoor kitchen style cooking. So unfortunately, you're probably not going to see anything sous vide on this channel, but if there is enough demand for it, you never know. All right, the next one's a comment from Envy This 101. Keen to see how this one turns out, mate. I'm keen to see how it turns out as well. Like I said before, I've done oyster blade a bunch of times, but I've never reverse seared it as a whole piece like this. So keen to see how it turns out, and I don't see why it's not going to be good. Right, and then we've got Electrical Face, and it says, all right, Jimmy, I challenge you to a kangaroo cut of meat, a slow cook of your choice on the K Weber, using all Australian ingredients, even some gum leaf. Now, I've definitely wanted to do some kangaroo on this channel, but the trouble is, it is such a lean animal. Pretty much all of the cuts aren't really going to go too well low and slow, but a mate and I, shout out Shane Cook, are talking about doing a roux tail, so stay tuned for that one. It might be a little while away, but the plan is to do a smoked kangaroo tail on this channel. And then the last comment is from Grant82GC. Nice, your videos have been a great help, and that's good to hear. That's exactly why I started the channel and why I still do it, and why I'll still be doing it hopefully for a very long time. I definitely don't know everything, and I'm still always learning myself, but I'm always happy to share the knowledge that I do have, and I'm very grateful for where this channel is, thanks to all of you guys. Right, so we're just over 30 minutes into this cook, and we're just going to check our internal temperature, and we're sitting at around 30 degrees Celsius internally. And all I'm going to do now, just to help ensure we get a nice even cook, is just flip our oyster blade over, then we'll shut our lid and let it keep going. All right, and after a bit over an hour, let's check this internal temperature. I reckon we'll be pretty close, if not there. We are pretty much at 47.5 degrees Celsius. So let's get this out. I'll put that on top of a wire rack, and I'll come back, take my cooking grate off, take that foil tray tray out. Then we'll sit our rack over the foil tray just to catch any juices. Then we'll come back to our barbecue and spread those briquettes out nice and even. And we'll leave our lid open while our steak rests so those briquettes get nice and red hot for when we finish our oyster blade off with a sear. Right, so our steak's been resting for 5 minutes and it seems to have peaked at about 52.6 degrees Celsius. Now we're just going to let it rest for around 10 minutes longer before we finish it off with a sear. Right, so it's almost been another 10 minutes that our steak has been resting for, and our internal temperature is now at around 48 degrees Celsius. Now, like I said earlier, we're just giving it a quick sear, and during that sear, our oyster blade will climb a few more degrees, but not enough that it's going to exceed that medium rare type doneness. And as you can see, our briquettes are raging hot, so we can get our cooking grate back on, and now we'll finish our oyster blade off with a sear for around a minute on all sides. And just to help get a nice even sear on our oyster blade, I'll keep it moving around on that cooking grate as well. Alright, and once your steak's seared on all sides, we can get it onto our cutting board and slice it up straight away because it's already had a rest. And as you can see, even straight after the sear, that internal temperature has barely climbed. Now, as you can see, there's that piece of gristle. So obviously just cut around that when you're eating your oyster blade. But as you can see, we've got a beautiful medium rare steak, maybe a little bit more on the rare side. But honestly, outside of that gristle, oyster blade or flat iron steak has a really good texture. So let's have a taste. So tender. Really nice flavour, and that's the gristle you're left with. You've got to trim it out anyway if you're turning your oyster blade into flat iron steaks, but the trouble with oyster blade when you turn them into flat irons, they're not really thick enough to reverse sear. So there you have it. There's how to reverse sear a whole oyster blade. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next videos. But for now, that's the end of the video, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.